Good morning, Kyle. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I am calling this meeting of the Prescott Active Management Area Groundwater Users Advisory Council to order. Today is February 28th, 2022, and the time is 10:04 a.m. This meeting is being held virtually. I am Jim Holt, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Groundwater Users Advisory Council. Would members of the GUAC please identify themselves? Have the members identified themselves?
So we can hear Jim Holt speak and no other audio.
There we go. Okay, that's his view.
Can you hear us?
Yes, John.
Okay. John Munderlow's here.
Bob Recker.
And I believe Leslie is here. Can she introduce herself?
See her.
I think I did earlier, but maybe my connection's not very good. So this is Leslie Grazer with the City of Prescott.
Excellent. Thank you, Leslie. I believe we have a quorum. Would the Department of Water Resources staff members introduce themselves, please?
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the council. My name is Kyle Miller. I am the AMA Director in charge of programs.
Good morning. My name is Natalie Nance. I'm the AMA Director responsible for planning.
Good morning. My name is Nanda Long, and I am the AMA Planning Manager.
Good morning, Nick Regendo, Industrial Planner.
Good morning. This is Dini. I'm the Municipal Planner in the AMA section.
I'm Kennedy Shepherd, Groundwater Users Advisory Council Coordinator.
Good morning. It's Jenna Norris, Governor's Water Council Coordinator.
Excellent. Thank you. If audience members are interested in introducing themselves, please type your name and affiliation into the chat box. I'd like to begin with agenda item number 2, webinar logistics. Kennedy Shepherd, if you would review the logistics with us, please.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So just a few things to go over before we get started. We do ask that members of the public, please keep your phone muted during the meeting. This helps us with audio feedback. Members of the public, if you do have any questions or comments in the chat box, please feel free to type those in there and we will address them at the end of the presentations. If you'd like to address the council, the public will be your time to do so. This meeting is being recorded and it will be posted to our website once WebEx generates it for us. And if you're having any technical difficulties, please feel free to contact our help desk and their information is on the screen. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kennedy. If we could move to agenda item number 3, Groundwater Users Advisory Council web page update. And that's also with Kennedy Shepherd.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to show, we worked on some updates for the GUAC meeting page. So what we had it, if you click here under Prescott, you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see the entire list of every Prescott GUAC meeting that we've had. This just gives the members of the public easier access to our agenda and the meeting materials. You can easily click here. And if you click on the title, that's where you'll see all the WebEx information and you'll see the presentation recordings here as well. So we just wanted to add a little bit more ease to the members of the public to try and find it, and you can also filter by year if you would like as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kennedy. If we could move to agenda item number 4, election of officers. Pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes 45-421, the Groundwater Users Advisory Council shall elect from its members a chairperson and a vice chairperson for terms of 2 years. I'll lead off the discussion. I would be more than happy to continue serving in the role of vice chair. I'd like to know if there are any members that would like to have that role. We certainly could talk about that. And we would also like to see if there are any nominations for chairperson. So maybe we could have some discussion among members.
Leslie, would you be willing to be chair?
Dialogue, Holt. I don't know if you're able to hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you, Leslie.
Okay. And I caught what member Munderlow had mentioned. If I can help this committee, I'd be happy to. I'm not sure if you're as a chair or vice chair speaking right now that you're speaking of.
Didn't quite make that out.
I think she's, Leslie, this is Bob Recker speaking. I would certainly support you if you decided that you would like to become chair for this committee.
Well, let's have more discussion. Would the current vice chair like to proceed into a chair position, and I can support as a vice chair for a little while?
Sounded to me like Jim would like to stay as vice chair. I can see his face.
Yes.
And I apologize. I had to call in again. So if you've already had discussion, I'm behind on this. So if Chairman Holt, you would, or Vice Chairman Holt, would you like to? What would your preference be? I'm happy to assist this group in any manner.
I believe that Leslie would make a excellent chairperson, and I would be happy to support Leslie in any manner as vice chair. Would be my preference.
Okay, I'm happy to work in that manner then.
All right, well, if it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to have Leslie be our chairman and you our vice chairman. Jim Holt, our vice chairman.
Yes, perhaps we could take your motion and do one portion of the motion at a time.
Okay.
So let's do a nomination of Leslie Grazer as chairperson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the second nomination would be for James Holt to serve as the vice chairperson. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. I think we have elected a chairperson and a vice chairperson. Thank you very much. Let's move to item number 5. Agenda item 5 is the City of Prescott Conservation webpage design. The discussion will be led by Kay Sito. She will present on the request for Water Management Assistance Program funding. Then Melissa Sykes will provide the Water Management Assistance Program fund account balance. Kay, would you like to present, please?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I am Kay Sito, Water Resource Project Manager with the City of Prescott, and my email and phone number are on that first slide. And if we could proceed to the next slide, please. So the city is seeking from Prescott GUAC $10,000 with an in-kind match by the City of Prescott for another $10,000. Next slide, please. There were 4 tasks. We have completed the first task. We have hired a professional web page designer, and her name is Sadie Sardi, and I did send over a copy of her website design proposal, and she is coming in at an amount of $6,800. Next slide, please. Our city IT department, chiefly Kenny Scott and Nate Keegan, will be supplying a lot of the backup work. We're going to have a new separate web page devoted entirely to conservation, but it will still be on our city's website. There'll be a link to it. The IT department will be responsible for uploading all the materials, and there will be multiple links that they'll have to provide, and I will be sending all those over to them at the appropriate time. Next slide, please. Here's our budget breakdown. Our IT department, we expect about 80 hours worth of work from these 2 men, and at almost $40 an hour, that's going to be about $3,000 and change. As water resource project manager, we'll probably put in about 90 hours all told. I have already done quite a bit of rewriting, but I haven't finished it. So my amount would be a little over $5,000. And then the deputy director, who is my supervisor, she will have to read everything that I rewrite. And so at about $1,500 of her time, we expect that it will come in very close to $10,000 in fees. Next slide. Okay. Task 2 is to stay in weekly or monthly communication with the web page designer. Now, she's the expert, and I certainly intend to allow her to use as much latitude as she wants to create her vision based on her own experience. This would be a first-time effort for me, but it will afford me the opportunity to follow her progress and make comments as needed on various pictures and text, etc. Next slide, please. Task 3 will be to finalize the design, and the deliverable here will be a revamped, cohesive web page. We expect to have a lot of colorful photos that illustrate the conservation requirements. There'll be direct links to our partnerships, a lot of the other websites, including AMWA and the GUAC and EPA, the WaterSense link. All those sorts of links will be on our new webpage. And it will be in a very logically laid out method. And that's what we're really hoping here for, is to have something that's really cohesive. Task 4, outreach. So once we get the web page up and running, I do intend to appear at various public events. We have farmers markets, homeowners associations. That's probably still quite a ways in the future because of COVID. There'll be some time before I'm able to make appearances there. But the Highland Center for Natural History, they have programs going on in March and April. The City Library, and also we'd like to do some messaging on city utility bills, and we could post flyers at multiple city facilities that advertise our new webpage. So how are we going to measure the effectiveness? Well, the rebate program is still largely underutilized, especially when it comes to rainwater harvesting and replacing turf. Right now, we do have a GIS specialist who's been working on scouring, using aerial photos, looking around to find businesses and maybe some homes that have a lot of turf. When we get those addresses, we could start maybe paying some visits and talking to some of these people about how they might be able to replace some of their turf. and they'd get a rebate for it, $3 a square foot, which is a pretty generous amount to get back, especially if you've been watering and overwatering turf. The rainwater harvesting, I did send over a guide to rainwater harvesting that I recently rewrote, relying heavily on Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for a lot of the colorful photographs, and gave them credit for those. There is no cap on how much of a rebate can go to City of Prescott water customers each year. Right now, we usually set aside about $4,000, but if it comes in higher than that, it's not a problem. Next slide, please. So I did want to mention that this is for calendar year 2021, that we did rebate 56 washing machines, 56 dual flush toilets, 17 single flush toilets, 15 irrigation controllers, turf removal. There were 14 projects, and there were 11 rainwater harvesting tanks installed in 2021. The next slide, please. Now, the turf removal that's the biggest bang for the buck, because at $3 a square foot, that's where most of the rebate money comes in. The rainwater tanks, it's not as much money, but it's still pretty significant. And then if you look at the number of washing machines, we rebated $12,200 in washing machines. And then you can see from the dual flush toilets, a little over $9,000, about $2,000 for single flush toilets. And then the irrigation controllers come in at, I forget how many, I think there were 11 on the previous page. So those are our rebate dollars issued in calendar year 2021. Next slide, please. Then when we want to look at gallons saved annually, this is pretty important, because when we look at the washing machines, we figured we've saved over 250,000 gallons in the last year. The toilets are huge, of $580,000, gallons we estimate may have been saved. Irrigation controllers, about 130,000 gallons saved. And then the turf removal is the huge number. We think 1,316,667 gallons of water will have been saved this last year, thanks to this rebate program. And then the rainwater tanks, about 108,000 gallons have been saved this past year. Next slide, please. So here's a couple of pictures. The City of Prescott Public Library did do a rain barrel project about 3 or 4 years ago. And you can see the rain barrel there in the right-hand corner. And it's used to water a lot of low water use plants. And I think the next slide shows the plants a little bit better. Yes, there are some of the low water use plants there. So next slide. So about the timeline, I just want to mention March is a really busy month for me. I'm the team leader for the Sonoran Institute Growing Water Smart program. So there were 3 days in March that I'm completely taken up with, and one afternoon in March. April is Water Awareness Month, and the library viewery, I need to create a display for that, and I have to have that ready by the end of March, so that's going to keep me very busy. And it will focus on rainwater harvesting and turf removal. And then my annual report to ADWR is due at the end of the month, so I'm working on that, but getting a good handle on it. And the Yavapai County Contractors Association Home and Garden Show will be at the end of April. So the upshot is, as far as the timeline goes, I will be able to get some work done in April. So I'm optimistic there, but May and June is probably more likely for the rewrites and final implementation of the new webpage. Does anyone have any questions for me?
I have a question, Kay. This is Jim Holt.
Yes, sir.
If we could go back to slide 19.
Okay, it's 4 back, I believe.
Yes, thank you. I
Mhm.
thought I heard earlier in the presentation that the rebate for turf removal was $3 a square foot.
Yes, sir.
And it looks like on this slide, we identified the turf removal at 50 cents a square foot.
Oh, oh, that's an error in my part. Yeah, it's $3 a square foot.
It is
Okay, that's,
$3.
it
Okay.
is. That's a misprint on, I apologize for that. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it created a little bit of confusion for me.
It did. It should have said $3 a square foot. My mistake.
No, it's all good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Are there any other questions on Kay's presentation? Hearing none, we'll move on to Melissa Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and good morning, council members and members of the public. I'll be going over the Water Management Assistance Program fund balance and the status of the DCP groundwater conservation grants. So the current balance for the Prescott GUAC or AMA is $95,968. Of that, $19,570 is committed, leaving a balance of $76,398. And we expect to collect about $13,000 annually. There are no current projects outside of the ADOT project through the DCP Groundwater Conservation Grant that's being funded with the WMAP funds. But if we were to include this webpage redesign, that would commit another $10,000, and then that would leave $66,398 in your fund. For the status of the groundwater conservation grants, all 3 projects are currently executed and in progress. And that's all I have for the updates. Is there any questions regarding the WMAP funds or the DCP projects?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, John.
Do we have a minimum balance requirement for our funds?
There is no balance requirement. If you mean, if you're referring to how much money needs to be spent on the projects?
Referring to how far we draw down the account, if we'd set any sort of rough idea on a minimum amount that we want to leave in there.
You don't have to leave any rough amount. You can use all the funds if you'd like, but if you, as the council, if you'd like to decide on an amount, that would be up to you.
I don't think we need to limit. I just wanted to know. Some of the groups we work with have limits.
Thank you, John. Are there any other questions for Melissa? Perhaps among the members, we can have some discussion and perhaps a recommendation regarding the funding request.
Mr. Vice Chair, we do have a question in the chat I thought we could address before voting begins. It's
Okay.
from Gary Beverly. He asks, how did you calculate the gallons saved?
Kay, can you address that?
Unmuting myself. Those are numbers that have been provided way before I started working here. And I will admit, I did try to chase down when I first took the job back in July of 2020. I did wonder about the gallons saved, and I did try to make some inquiries into how those numbers came about. And I never really got a good answer. But all I can say is I think they've been established figures for a long time, but I'm not sure where they came from. But it's we in our rebate program, when we go in and add and look at all the figures, these are the numbers that come up for each one of these different types of rebates.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Those are all the questions we have in the chat.
So among the members, are there any points that anybody wishes to discuss, or is there a recommendation anyone would like to make?
Chairman, this is Leslie.
Yes, Leslie.
I just want to briefly say, because I work for the community that's seeking these funds, I'm going to go ahead and need to abstain from the vote. So I will also check out a conversation on this as well as you work through your thoughts. Thank you.
I do see a couple more follow-up questions.
Okay.
Leslie Hoy asked if Kay, does the water resource management model help with the gallons saved? No, that is not the source that is used. And the gallons saved for 2021, this is annual. This is not cumulative, Mr. Beverly. So this is what was just saved in the calendar year 2021. There are other reports that have been run that do show a cumulative amount from the beginning of the program. But this is just for this past year.
All right, thank you. John or Bob, do either of you have any comments, or would you like to make a recommendation?
I would, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve use the WMAP funds for, or the GUAC funds for the webpage redesign for the City of Prescott Conservation Program.
Thank you, John. Is there any additional discussion regarding the motion? All those in favor of the recommendation funding for this effort, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Sounds like none.
Before we go ahead with the approval, can we get an amount for record's sake?
The motion was for $10,000. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Then I'll amend the motion for a $10,000 grant for the City of Prescott Conservation webpage redesign.
And let's go ahead and re-vote on the revised motion. All those in favor? I'm sorry.
Chairman, could we add not to exceed 10,000 on there before we vote?
We could. Does it provide you some comfort?
It would.
Okay. So John, you want to revise your motion again?
Then a revision number 2, motion to approve $10,000 grant, not to exceed $10,000 grant for the City of Prescott Conservation webpage design.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? So let's, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Thank you, council. Thank you, ladies, for your presentations. We'll go to item number
Thank you
6.
all very much. Appreciate it.
You bet. We'll go to item number 6. Jenna will provide us with a update on the Governor's Water Augmentation Innovation in Conservation Council. Jenna? Jenna, are you speaking? I'm not hearing you.
Was it muted? Okay.
I think you were, yes.
We have a new microphone at the department here, so if you do have any trouble hearing me, please let me know and I will just try to speak louder
Okay.
to the best of my ability. So I was just really introducing myself and saying good morning, Vice Chair Holt, members of the council. I coordinate the Governor's Water Council, and I will go ahead and get started with the update. So this first slide that we're on is concerning the Governor's Water Council webpage. I believe the last time that I was with you all and giving an update that we did look at the webpage, but it has been updated since then. And I think it's a little more streamlined and easier to find materials. So Kennedy, if you would go ahead and click on the link, we can look at the website really quickly and see how the accessibility has been improved. So if you go to our department's website, go to programs, Governor's Water Augmentation Council, or you can go this way as well. This works too. And then on the right-hand side, there's the meetings page. So everything has been condensed. And now we have all of our previous meetings and upcoming meetings on one page, and it's searchable. So if you're looking for, like, say, all of the post-2025 previous meetings, you could search that up at the top. And all of the committee meeting videos, agendas, presentations, any materials are posted here. And then additionally, there's a new documents page, which is to the right-hand side. Kennedy, if you scroll up in the navigation pane. And much the same, it condensed all of the documents that have been outputs of the council and committees, and it's now searchable. So you can either sort it by whether you were looking, for example, for like the council's annual report, you could go down and click on GWAKE, and that would be pull up all of the documents that have come specifically out of the council, such as the 2 annual reports. So I just wanted to share that. As we go through the council updates, if there's anything that you'd like to look into further, you'll be able to find it on that website. So the council's last quarterly meeting was on November 30th. The meeting recording is linked on this slide and as well as on the website. Chairman Director Bishotsky started off the meeting with a Colorado River update in which he shared information about the 1030 consultation and the resulting 500 plus plan. Next, the chair shared an update on the discussion of additional management plans, which had been an ongoing discussion over the course of the previous couple council meetings. Finally, the committee shared updates with the council, and really the bulk of this presentation will be elaborating on those committee updates. You may also note that the next meeting of the council is currently scheduled for just over, well, I guess it's just under a month now. So on March 25th from 10 a.m. to noon. The virtual login information is posted to our website, and I will be sending out a reminder likely today, if not today, sometime this week. All right, thanks, Kennedy. The non-AMA Groundwater Committee met ahead of that November council meeting on October 14th, and they have also met again on January 6th. At the October 14th meeting, as you'll see on the right-hand side of this slide, Representative Griffin shared a summary of the 2021 legislative accomplishments for water, which was followed by presentations on enhanced recharge from Keith Nelson, who's the ABWR Senior Research Hydrologist, and Nick Hunt, retired Director of Development Services for Mojave County, and I believe also a current Senior Civil Engineer at Mojave County. Keith's presentation recapped a presentation he had given to the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee in August, and Nick presented an overview of Mojave County's stormwater infiltration program. Members also discussed and revisited the non-AMA Groundwater Committee goals at that October meeting. Committee participants, along with co-chair Jamie Kelly, stated the desire to have further discussion on water management strategies such as INAs, RMAs, and subsequent AMAs at a next meeting. At the January 6th meeting of the committee, Jamie Kelly posed to the committee what are the various possible objectives, goals, and needs for additional groundwater management in rural areas. And then she shared a number of slides summarizing the various choices for potential groundwater management structures and tools. Following this presentation, Carol Ward, Deputy Assistant Director here at the department, shared an overview of the available and existing voluntary options and tools to address water availability. Following both of these presentations, there was a robust discussion by committee members, which led to the question of forming a subcommittee to further explore rural groundwater management strategies. However, consensus was not reached by the committee and the subcommittee was not formed at that time. Next slide. The Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee did not have a report for the council at the last council meeting, as they had not met since August. But as you'll see on your screen, they have met since. They met on January 13th and heard presentations on weather modification and cloud control. John Riggins, ADWR Statewide Planning Manager, started off the topic, giving some background and context for the discussion. And Jennifer Hine, ADWR Deputy Counsel, presented on the current existing statutes governing weather projects in the state, highlighting the gaps in the current statutes and the question that those gaps give rise to. Catherine Rydell, ADWR Community Water Systems Coordinator, then went on to compare the various regulatory requirements and provisions for those states which have weather modification laws. And the ADWR presentations were followed by a presentation from James Walter, SRP Water Measurement Lead and Meteorologist. He presented a timeline of breakthroughs in weather modification and cloud seeding science. And he also shared an update on the White Mountains Research Project, which is a feasibility study being conducted by the Desert Research Institute and is funded through a partnership between SRP, White Mountain Apache Tribe, ADWR, as well as the City of Phoenix and Tempe. The committee meeting ended with a discussion facilitated by Chair Wade Noble on the potential for this committee to develop a long-term water augmentation plan in the future. Moving on to the post-2025 AMA committee. This is the last of the committee updates, so I know we went through a lot. The post-2025 AMA committee is very busy leading up to the November 30th council meeting, meeting 3 times on October 5th, October 27th, and November 9th. At the October 5th meeting, the committee heard a presentation from Ron Doba of NAMWA, who presented the findings and draft recommendations of the Prescott AMA Exempt Well Study Group. This was followed by a robust discussion from committee participants. The draft of that Prescott AMA Exempt Well Study Group recommendation is posted to the council webpage and is also linked on this slide for convenience. At the October 27th meeting and at the November 9th meeting, the committee discussed the 2021 package of proposals. Those discussions were spirited but productive. The committee co-chairs determined that the proposed potential solutions, which met 3 defined criteria, would be brought forward to the council. Those criteria were ideas that addressed more than one challenge or opportunity, had overall committee support, and finally were politically viable in 2022, considering the current ADWR and legislative leadership. So at the November 30th council meeting, committee co-chairs brought forward a package of 5 proposals, which include ideas for potential legislation, rules, and policy, as well as an additional list of ideas for potential further exploration in 2022 and beyond. That package of proposals is, of course, posted to our website, as well as linked on this slide. So that concludes my update. I have my contact information on here if you have any questions or need any assistance when it comes to the council. There's also the newest member of statewide planning's contact info on here, who's Nadine Hubbard, helping me with the council, and then John Briggins, who is both of our managers and the statewide planning manager. So that's it for me. Thank you again for having me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jenna, for your presentation. Are there any questions for Jenna among the council members?
Chairman Holt, do you mind if I step in?
I do not mind. Please step in.
That little hand is different on each one of these platforms that we use. It's kind of funny. It's making me laugh. So my question is, what is the, what's the forward look now for the Governor's Water Group?
That's a good question. You know what? I have a meeting with Director Bishatsky, who is of course also the chair of that council, coming up, and I'm certain that's going to be something we will discuss. I have no definitive answer as to what the outlook of that group is right now.
Okay, thank you. I know there was a lot of work put into so many different topics with the governor's group and the subgroups. We're trying hard to track legislative actions, but was there anything that came from the work that has been done that made it onto the legislative agenda? And I know that's a pretty big question to ask, so if you do have some information on that, great. If not, I understand.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind, but I'll be honest, I'm not sure where it landed, was I know that there was one of the recommendations from 2025 was for funding for rulemaking for DTC, direct DPR, yes, direct reuse. So many acronyms in the water world. I don't think I'll ever get used to them. So the funding to ADAQ for rulemaking for DPR, I know, I believe is in the works. Beyond that, as far as recommendations that came out of post 2025, many of their recommendations were actually more centered around requests for the department to review potential for improvements. And so there are things underway with that. And if something else comes to mind that was in this legislative session that is connected directly to the council, I will reach out to you, Leslie. But that's all that comes to mind at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kyle, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
Perhaps after Jenna has an opportunity to meet with Director Bishatsky, she could provide you some of the summary of the discussion regarding the outlook of the council. And maybe you could share that then with members.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. That sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Any other questions for Jenna?
If I may ask one more.
Oh, I was going to comment very quickly on Vice Chair Holt as well, that it's very possible that being that there's a council meeting coming up in March, I think that's a question on a lot of folks' mind. So it's possible that will be given more clarity following the March 25th council meeting as well.
Okay, good. Thank you, Jenna.
You're welcome.
And I believe Leslie had another comment.
I did. I apologize. And I think I jumped ahead. So I'll wait and hold until we get to the fifth management plan discussion. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay. Any other questions for Jenna on the council update? Hearing none, we'll go to agenda item number 7, Prescott Active Management Area Draft 5th Management Plan. We'll have some discussion regarding and presentation on the draft 5th Management Plan for the Prescott AMA. And then we will have some ADWR staff presentations on the AMA sector data dashboards. So I believe Natalie will begin with the presentation on the draft 5th Management Plan.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Holt. I appreciate it. And good morning, Vice Chair Holt and members of the council. Thank you for having me. My name is Natalie Mast. I'm the AMA director responsible for planning and the management plans here at ADWR. And I'm very pleased to say that on January 31st, we published a draft 5th management plan for the Prescott Active Management Area. My colleagues are here today to discuss that plan and also to request your comments and recommendation on that draft. Next slide, please. We are going to cover a lot of ground today. I know there's a lot here. I would defer to the preference of the council as to whether we want to hold questions to the end in the interest of time, or whether we want to do questions throughout. But there is a lot here, and I think in our last run through of this, it did take about an hour. So yeah. In any case, whenever there are questions, we would be happy to flip back to previous slides or anything as needed. So first here, I'll provide an overview of the 5th management plan, and then I'll hand it over to Amanda and Nick and Colette, who will walk us through our new data dashboards. After that, Sandy Favorites was going to be here to provide us an overview of the mining proposal, but she unfortunately had a last-minute time conflict. So instead, I will provide a little bit of background on that mining proposal and point you all to some additional information on that. After that, I will also provide some information on the process going forward, at which point we'll hand things back over to the council, Mr. Vice Chair, for any questions and discussion. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I know you all are familiar with the Groundwater Management Act that was passed in 1980. But I really wanted to note here that a lot has changed since 1980 when the act was passed. But one thing is really well acknowledged. One thing is for certain, that the AMAs in the state of Arizona are undoubtedly in a stronger and more resilient position because of the Groundwater Management Act. Next slide. The act set forth a variety of requirements, created the initial AMAs, and established a series of 5 management plans for those AMAs. The plans were designed to be incremental, gradually increasing conservation requirements over time, moving toward the management goal of each AMA, which is safe field for the Prescott AMA, and moving toward those management goals by reducing withdrawals of groundwater. The plan we're discussing today is the 5th management plan, which is the last in that series. Assuming we meet the adoption timeline I will lay out later in the presentation, the requirements in the 5th management plan will go into effect on January 1st, 2025, and will remain in effect until the legislature determines otherwise. We began the process to develop the 5th management plans in mid-2019. We conducted an extensive stakeholder process, working with folks across the AMAs and across sectors to develop conservation programs for the 5 MPs that were responsive to stakeholder concerns and would function to reduce withdrawals of groundwater. Over the course of last year, we worked to put those concepts into draft regulatory language and to draft a narrative to support those requirements. We intend to spend the course of this year working through the legal adoption process or the promulgation process for the 5th management plan for each AMA. Next slide, please. The draft 5th management plan, as I said earlier, was published to ADWR's website on January 31st. The management plan's webpage also includes link to low water use plants list, supplement 1, which lists allotment data for each ag right, and to a report that was also published on January 31st that details the method for analyzing safe field and discusses the status with regard to each AMA, the status of each AMA with regard to its goal. Next slide. One of our major goals for the 5th management plans was to streamline these documents. Much of that streamlining could be achieved by referring to supplemental information rather than including extensive detail within the plan. For example, rather than extensively detailing geologic structures and hydrologic conditions, we point to the most recent model report. This both allows the management plan to be streamlined and also ensures that the reader is directed to the most up-to-date information available. This was particularly important for the 5th management plans due to that indefinite timeline of this plan. By streamlining, we were also able to condense the document from 12 chapters to 8 chapters. And we added an executive summary, which provides a brief overview of the document itself and helps to point the reader to additional detail throughout. Another way we streamlined the document was moving much of the data online. Previous plans had extensive data tables printed in the document, but those tables were unable to be corrected if errors were found and could not be updated with additional years of data over time. The growth of interactive online tools has allowed us to move much of that previously static data online, allowing us to provide additional detail and to improve our data transparency by making more of that data more readily available. In addition to the interactive tools and downloadable data on our data page, as I mentioned earlier, we also published a comprehensive report, which includes a description of the aspects of Safe Field, how ADWR analyzes those aspects, and the status of each AMA with regard to its management goal. We do plan to present more information about that report and talk through the details there at a future GUAC meeting, but we really wanted to focus on the management plans themselves for this meeting. The result of these structural updates for the management plan is a plan that's more accessible, easier to navigate, and with data and references that will remain updated through the indefinite timeline of the 5th management plans. In addition to the structural changes, the 5th management plans also contain significant updates to the conservation requirements. We began the development process for the 5 MPs with in-person meetings in 2019, but moved to an online-only format in early 2020 due to the pandemic. In order to address some of the challenges of holding these types of meetings online, we developed a number of strategies. Use of the chat function in our online meetings, pauses in the meetings to allow time for people to type questions or speak up, online questionnaires for additional questions or feedback after the meeting, and the 5 MP concepts page, which you can see displayed on the slide. The concepts page was developed as an effort at transparency and improved communication, providing a one-stop location for quick summaries about each of the proposals we were developing for the 5 MPs, data about those proposals, references to meetings where those proposals were discussed, and stakeholder comments about those proposals. Eventually, we added draft regulatory language for each of the proposals to this webpage. This page is still available and now functions as an overview of the updates made for the 5 MPs and allows stakeholders to explore some of the history of the development and the rationale for development for each of the 5 MP conservation programs. We've talked about many of these items in previous meetings, but I'll provide a quick overview today as well. In the recharge chapter, there was language related to the storage of water in areas with shallow depth to water that was originally added to the 3rd management plans. This language had not previously been enforced, at least partially due to a lack of clarity around what shallow meant. In order to be transparent about how that language would be enforced, the draft language for the 5 MP has been expanded to include a definition of shallow as 50 feet or less below land surface, and to allow for a report which will define the areas within the AMA deemed to be shallow, allowing us to both narrow and update those determinations of those areas over time. ADWR has heard some stakeholder feedback regarding the need for additional clarity on this definition, and we are currently working with stakeholders to add some clarifying language here that would indicate possible criteria in addition to that 50-foot indicator, including considerations for mounding around recharge facilities, for shallow water and riparian areas, and for areas where dewatering and drainage activities are occurring. Ultimately, the goal is to avoid additional water going to areas that are already shallow and to protect that water that is being stored. For the Ag chapter, the updates are broader. The default conservation program for Ag is what we call the base program, an allotment-based program based on historic acreages and historically grown crops. For this program, statute allows for a 5% reduction of the top 25% of water duties within a series of limitations. For the BMP program, which is an optional alternative program, extensive updates were made to the list of BMPs and minimum points requirements for several categories were updated. These updates were made in collaboration and with the recommendation of the BMP Advisory Committee, which is chaired by Scott Riggins. In the Prescott AMA, we do not currently have any BMP participants. Finally, there is an additional optional alternative program for the Fifth Management Plan, which allows someone farming multiple IGFRs to combine the allotments of those IGFRs with a 5% cut to the aquifer, enabling that person to submit a single annual report, to use any of that combined allotment anywhere across the combined footprint of those IGFRs, and encouraging using that water on the most efficient lands. Excellent. In the municipal chapter, we also have multiple programs. The major updates to the programs were for the programs for large providers, or those supplying 250 acre-feet, more than 250 acre-feet of water for non-irrigation use. The GPCD program is the default program for large providers who have a designation of assured water supply, and providers who are not designated may not participate in a GPCD program. The 5MP draft language contains an updated calculation for the GPCD requirement, which uses a rolling average of the provider's historic GPCD to calculate the provider's target. Excuse me. This calculation functions to apply downward pressure to a provider's GPCD, allowing that for a number that is customized to the provider, could reasonably be achieved, and reflects reductions in withdrawals of groundwater through that downward pressure on GPCDs over time. The non-per capita program is a BMP style program for large municipal providers. Designated providers may opt into this program, and undesignated providers are required to participate in this program. Significant updates were made to the BMP list for this program, and updates were made to the points, targets, and tiers for this program. In the industrial chapter, several subsectors have proposed updates. For power plants, a minor update allows for a modification to be made to the cycles of concentration requirements if blowdown water will be beneficially reused. For golf courses, the method for calculating conservation allotments was redesigned to better reflect overseeding practices and more recent consumptive use analyses. For non-golf turf facilities, the allotment calculation was split in two: a less generous calculation for facilities with more than 30% water-intensive landscape, and a more generous calculation for facilities with less than or equal to 30% water-intensive landscape. This is designed to incentivize those more efficient types of landscapes and includes a provision to provide a consideration for parks and schools, where additional turf may have functional purposes like sports fields. As I mentioned earlier, next slide. In addition to the updates to the conservation requirements, the draft 5MP also simply looks different than previous plans. We've worked to streamline and move things to interactive online formats. We've also worked to add information about how folks can be engaged. These GUAC meetings are just one way that people can be engaged. Jenna talked earlier about the council and the opportunity for engagement there. And AMA staff are available by phone and email for one-on-one support. whether it be a specific annual report question, a question about historical data, or an idea for improvement. Next slide. That all said, the transparency and data availability improvements are one of the things we're most proud of in all of this. So with that, I will hand things off to Amanda to introduce the sector dashboards. Amanda?
Thanks, Natalie. Just give us a second while we pull up the webpage. So good morning, Vice Chair Holt and members of the council. My name is Amanda Long and I am the AMA Planning Manager. So along with our two planners here, Nick and Colette, we'll be walking you through the sector data dashboards. So as Natalie mentioned, the data dashboards were created for each sector, agricultural, industrial, and municipal, as a supplement to the fifth management plans and also to support our data transparency efforts. In the past, data included in the management plans was static and didn't cover the whole management period, and the data within the plans were also difficult to update. So for the fifth management plan, we have removed a lot of the data in the plan itself into these interactive dashboards. The dashboards can be updated every year with the most up-to-date data, and it also allows the user to filter to the information that they are most interested in. So the data dashboards are located on the AMA data webpage, which is pulled up here. And if you scroll down, you'll see a bunch of drop downs for some of our dashboards, including the three sectors we're going to walk through today. So I will start with the agricultural dashboard. If you click on the drop down, it'll open the dashboard, and you can work with the dashboard within the drop down itself, or you can expand the dashboard so it's a little bit easier to see. So there are 7 pages on the agricultural dashboard. This first page shows water supply by type over time, and then irrigation acres over time as well. And this information can be filtered by year and AMA and water type. So I'll go ahead and filter to Prescott. You can choose a water type, and then if you wish, you can choose a time period. So there's 2016 and 2019 as an example. So the second page is similar to the bottom graph of the first page, except that you can search by specific IGFR. So you can type in the right that you are interested in, and it will show you the water supply over time for that specific right. And again, you can filter by time here, and it will also show the allotment for that specific right and the irrigation acres for that specific right. Also on this page are some helpful links. So this one links to our image records, which is where you can find historical information on that right. And the second one is to our groundwater rights map, where you can look up your groundwater rights. So the third page shows information on flexibility credits. This is similar to the second page where you can search for the right that you're interested in. And it will filter to that right, show you the flexibility credits or accounts are over time, the balance over time. And then you can filter by time, and it will show you the AMA, the sub-basin, and the irrigation district. And if you click on this link here, it can show you a link to where you can find flexibility credits on sale. This page here shows the water supply over time, again, or sorry, for a specific year, and you can choose the year that you're interested in for irrigation districts. So I believe in the Prescott AMA, I'm probably interested in Chino Valley. So you can click on the irrigation district you're interested in, and it will show you the different water types and the amounts. And these next 2 pages might not be as relevant to the Prescott AMA because they are for the BMP program, or the Best Management Practices program, and there are no participants from the Prescott AMA. However, this does show the practices that are being implemented in category 3 on this page and category 4 on this page. And again, you can filter by time, and then you can choose AMA. So if the Prescott AMA does have participants in the future, we can update that and it will show Prescott here as well. And then the last page of this dashboard shows just some relevant definitions for the agricultural program. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it to Nick Rodendo, who's our industrial planner, to walk you through the industrial dashboard.
Good morning, Vice Chair Holt and members of the council. My name is Nick Rodendo, and I'll be going over the industrial data dashboard. So very similar to the agricultural dashboard, it's the same layout, very user-friendly. Here we got the demand by subsector. You can filter out AMA, you could filter out the type of facility you want to see. So for example, we'll just do Prescott. Right now in Prescott, we only got there's only sand and gravel and turf facilities. So if you wanted to just look at schools in specific or parks in specific, you can do that as well. And then here we got a little slider for the years. So you can look at, right now we got 2000 to 2019. You could adjust it to whatever years you'd like to see. The next slide, we got the industrial demand by supply source. So this same layout as the other one. You could filter it by the AMA, you could filter it by the facility type, and here it also shows you the type of water. So we got commingled, Colorado River water, affluent, groundwater, and surface water. So if we wanted to look at golf courses in the Prescott AMA, you can see that groundwater is primarily the most dominant, and then there's effluent as well. And as well, you can adjust the year. And this as well, you can see it was last updated January 6th. So when we get more annual reports coming in for this upcoming year, we're going to update this so you can see the annual reporting year for 2021. The next slide, we got turf facility demand and allotment over time. So this one as well, same filters with the AMA, the facility type. We got total use, the allotment quantity right here, and then we have the compliance use, which is the total use adjusted for effluent. And you can also filter out if they're using groundwater or not. And we got acre feet on the y-axis and year on the x-axis. And just like the agriculture dashboard, we got a definition page. This helps. All these are very relevant for the entire dashboard. So if anything confuses you for the dashboard, you can go to this definition page and it'll give you a better purpose for what's going on in this dashboard. If there are no questions, I'd like to thank you for your time, Vice Chair Holt and members of the council. I'd like to pass it on to Colette Pansini, our municipal planner.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the council. My name is Colette Pansini. I'm the municipal planner in the AMA section. I'm going to walk you through some of the elements of our municipal dashboard. So this first tab, when you open it up, is just some general information about muni providers. The intention here is for you to filter either by an AMA or for a specific muni provider. So if you're interested in City of Prescott, you could type that in and then click on the provider here. And this information over on the top right will filter that to that provider. There's just some things like the right type, conservation program that they're in, service area population and things like that. This bottom left pie chart is the 2020 supply by water type. You can also hover over and get the quantity in acre feet. And this will be updated as future annual report years come in. So when 2021 is done, this will show the 2021 supply by water type. And then also the overall demand over time for that provider from 2000 to 2020. This next slide is further looking at supply and demand through the lens of large and small providers. The default on this page is to large providers, but you can click on this button over here and it will switch over to information specific to small providers. This top graph is looking at supply over time broken up by water type. And again, you can hover over and get more specifics about the acre feet. And then this top right is looking at the demand over time broken up by non-residential, residential, and urban irrigation. And then we also have some filters down here. If you want to look at a specific AMA, such as Prescott, you could click on this filter. And then if you wanted to look at a certain water type, you could further filter it to the water type you're interested in. And then we also have a filter to look at conservation programs. So if you wanted to look at large providers in the Prescott AMA that are in the non per capita program, you could take a look at that granular level data. This third slide is looking at exempt wells. So this first chart, this red line right here is looking at the number of exempt wells, as well as these gray bars showing the exempt well population or the estimated exempt well population. And then this bottom graph is the estimated exempt well volume pumped in acre feet. And again, you can hover over any of this and it'll give you the specific quantities. And then this last slide is looking at large provider conservation. So this donut chart up here is telling us the number of providers in each conservation program. And again, you can filter it by AMA. And you can see that there's one provider in the not-for-profit program and one in the GPCD. This top right graph is looking at the 10 most frequently implemented BMPs for providers in the non-per-capita program. So again, you can filter by AMA and that would show the top 10 most popular BMPs, or you could look at it by reporting year to see trends through the different years. And then this bottom left graph is looking at the average actual GPCD versus the average target GPCD of providers in that program from 2000 to 2020. And then this graph on the right is a histogram of lost and unaccounted for water percentages for large providers. So anything that's green is basically an LNU percentage that's under 10%, which is in compliance with the management plans. And then these yellow, orange, and red colors are providers who are above that 10% threshold. And then you can also filter the LNU chart by providers in the GPCD program or those in the non-per-capita. And then lastly, we just have some definitions that are relevant to the municipal sector. And that is all I have. Does anyone have any questions about any of the three dashboards?
I'm not hearing any questions, so we'll go on and go on to the next item, which is the Alternative Mining Conservation Program. In Sandy's absence, I'll provide just a little bit of a background on this mining proposal. We did receive this proposal for an alternative mining program pretty late in the process for the development of the 5 MPs. So we didn't get a chance to discuss it publicly with folks. But staff saw it as a well-developed proposal that warranted consideration. Since we didn't want to just drop it into the plans and include it without discussion, we saw the GUAC meetings as an opportunity to have that discussion about its possible inclusion in the FIT management plan. On the calendar page for this meeting, there are links to the slides that Sandy presented at the Tucson GUAC and to the language of that proposal. The existing mining program includes some basic requirements about increasing tailing densities, reducing water loss, and minimizing water use in various ways. The proposal is an alternative program. This would not replace the existing program, but would be an option, that, something that they could opt into. And under this alternative program, mines could opt to implement BMPs from each of 6 categories as an alternative to that existing program. We would be interested in any thoughts you have on the inclusion of this program in the FIT management plans. Next slide, please. So we have covered a lot of ground here. And as I said at the beginning, we're more than happy to go back and answer any questions. And we'd also be glad to follow up with folks individually if you'd like to have more detailed discussion. Before we get to that, though, I'd like to talk briefly about next steps. Statute indicates that the GUACs are to make recommendations on groundwater management programs and policies for the active management area and comment to the area director and to the director on draft management plans for the active management area before they are promulgated.
Ultimately, the purpose of this presentation is to provide a baseline of information to allow for those comments and recommendations. Next slide, please. We are currently in the light blue portion of the timeline that you see on your screen. After today, we will be working to update the draft plan in response to comments, and we'll begin to prepare for the promulgation of the legal adoption of the 5th management plan for the Prescott AMA. The promulgation process is defined in statute and also includes a comment period beginning on the day the promulgation order is issued and the hearing is announced, and ending at 5 p.m. on the date of the hearing. Anyone can submit comments in writing during that time period, or they can submit verbal comments at the hearing. After the hearing, ADWR will issue findings from the hearing and may decide at that time to adopt the plan. When the plan is adopted, we will send a notice of conservation requirements to all regulated parties. And assuming we meet our timeline of sending those notices in 2022, those requirements will become effective on January 1st, 2025. I do want to emphasize the importance of that timeline. In 2018, the Auditor General issued a report directing ADWR to complete and promulgate the 5th management plans. And it's very important that we meet this timeline of adopting those plans by the end of 2022 so that the conservation requirements become effective on January 1st, 2025. Next slide, please. So finally, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the GOAC, I would like to thank you for your time and attention today and over the last several years as we've worked through this process. And I would like to respectfully request your comments on the 5th management plan and your recommendation on the promulgation of that plan. So with that, Mr. Vice Chair, I would gladly take any questions that you and the council may have at this time.
Presentation of the data in the dashboards is pretty extraordinary from kind of where we began a few years back. So I wanted to applaud the department for that effort. Are there any comments or discussion among members regarding the draft management plan and or the data sector dashboards?
I have a quick question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, John.
Vice Chair. Natalie, I understand you're managing all 5 of these AMA 5th management plans moving forward at the same time?
Yes, that's correct.
So we're all in the same time frame? Okay. Well, I have some questions and some comments on the draft plan that ADWR sent on the Prescott Active Management Area. And, you know, I understand that you're under a pretty severe timeline. And you also likewise gave us a very short timeline for the review. And that's a concern to us that there are quite a few issues with the draft report that should be dealt with. And certainly there are quite a few issues that then cause additional review comments. In particular, reviewing the data set that you sent, I guess it's the dashboard, the Excel file, is missing significant portions of the data. Most notably, all of the 2019 recharge data is missing, yet ADWR's management plan published a very large overdraft number for the Prescott AMA for 2019, based apparently off of all that missing recharge data. With missing data, with assumptions made based off that missing data, it's very difficult to know whether this is the report we should review. If it is the report we should review, we need more time to review it, or more succinctly, I would suggest that ADWR make the large corrections to the large errors and then give us additional time to review a corrected draft. Additionally, I found that the rework of the format, although the data dashboard is a neat and good way to deal with retrospective data, there was no prospective analysis of reaching safe yield, of alternatives to reaching safe yield. Instead, the reports seemed to be very abstract about the possibilities of reaching safe yield. There were no real recommendations other than that ADWR was going to be more of a regulatory body. Again, if the fourth management plan had those scenarios, that modeling, that kind of prospective outreach of different ways that the Prescott AMA could reach safe yield, if that is unchanged, then I'd suggest that you point to those scenarios as the process moving forward. Otherwise, I don't find that the fifth management plan provides much guidance.
Mr. Munderloh, I appreciate those comments. Thank you. As for the missing data, Amanda, I think we can double check that. Do you know what he's referring to there?
I'm not sure what you're referring to for the missing data.
Okay. We'll double check that and confirm that with you. We do, as I mentioned quite a bit earlier in the presentation, so we do plan to discuss in some detail that safe yield report that the department published. So we were intending at a future meeting of the GUAC to discuss in some detail both the data for Prescott and kind of the methodology there. So ahead of that, we will intend to just kind of double check that and follow up with you, John. As for the perspective analysis, I do appreciate those comments. We, for the fifth management plans and also the more recent fourth management plans, the Phoenix, Pinal and Santa Cruz fourth management plans, we removed a lot of those prospective analyses from the fourth management plans, and we removed them from the fifth management plans. The rationale there was that we had some concerns about placing too much weight on any single set of assumptions. When you publish analyses and projections like that in one place, you're kind of limited in how you can publish them. So what we are working on now is a process separate from the management plans to rework those types of projections and scenario analyses. We are still working through the details of what exactly that's going to look like, but we do intend for there to be a stakeholder process associated with that. I think we'll probably be able to provide some more information on all of that at a later GUAC meeting as well.
Are there other comments, John?
No, I appreciate all that, but I'm having a hard time agreeing to a recommendation to move this fifth management plan forward, giving the what I see are holes in the analysis.
Vice Chairman.
If I might ask a question, Bob, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just have one question. I'm just a citizen at large on this committee, and I'm getting myself a little confused about the term safe yield and whether or not that term should be in the 2025 plan or not.
Sure. So safe yield is the statutorily established management goal for the Prescott AMA. The analyses contained in our report regarding safe yield work through a calculation of whether the AMA has historically been achieving or moving towards safe yield. We do plan to talk about that in some more detail at a later meeting. Ultimately, though, the management goal and the management plans are a little bit separate. The management plans are ultimately, at their core, a regulatory document that are intended to contain the conservation programs for the management, for the active management area to move toward its goal. So really the focus of the plans itself is not that goal so much as it is the details of the conservation programs that help to reduce withdrawals of groundwater and move each AMA toward its goal, if that makes sense.
Okay, so the future meeting, will it discuss any specific processes or procedures to take to achieve safe yield in our AMA? Because we've known for quite some time that we're not going to be able to achieve safe yield unless we import water. Is that being taken into consideration in future meetings? And should that be addressed even abstractly in the 2025 plan?
I think it's addressed abstractly in the plan. And what we intend to do with the kind of scenario planning and projections process that we're really building right now is analyze exactly those types of things. What are the implications for the Prescott AMA in terms of potential new sources of water or changes to different supplies and demands? So I think a lot of that will be coming through that planning and some scenario analysis process that we're working on building now. And we can certainly provide more discussion of that at a future meeting.
Okay, would there, one more quick question. It's going to be an extremely expensive thing to import water into our AMA. And I'm wondering is it appropriate for this scenario, this group, to make recommendations regarding funding of those kinds of programs? Would that be in the plan at any point at all?
That's a really good question. The outside of the water management assistance program, the plan doesn't really function as financial recommendations or anything like that, or as funding opportunities for specific infrastructure projects or anything like that. That's something that would need to be managed more at a local level. The plan is really intended to be, as I said, that regulatory document with the details of those conservation programs.
Thank you.
Does Leslie have any comments?
I do, and probably too many, unfortunately. I'll see if I can make these as tight as possible. Thank you, Vice Chair Holt. I wanted to follow up on Member Munderlow's question, and I've gone to the dashboard, and I want to see if we're on the same page. I know that the different leaders, in their industrial, municipal, and ag were able to show us the dashboard and walk through that. Are we able to open that up on the screen? Because this is something that the city has started to discuss with their subcommittee for water issues. And so I recall there being a link to the data behind the graphs. When I look at the overdraft dashboard, this is the one I think that Member Munderlow had a question on. So I guess we'd have to drop down a little bit to the overdraft dashboard. when you open that, and then the data behind it, there was an Excel file that you could see. Is that still available online?
I believe it's still available on the development dashboard, so that's the raw data. I don't think it is available for this one, but we could make it available. That's something that's pretty easy to do. We'll get that corrected. Sorry about that, Leslie. But the raw
that's
data,
okay. Yeah.
excuse me.
Go ahead. Sorry.
All right. The raw data that we started the analysis with, though, is still available on the 5MP concepts page in the development dashboard, which, if you've looked at this data before, was kind of the original dashboard that we used throughout the Safe Field technical group process.
Okay, so that's available online. Can we go to that?
Yeah. Do you want to 5MP concepts?
Sorry, I know it's hard to navigate on the fly. Because it really is a big question if there's a data concern, and it's translating through into the dashboard, and it's translating then into the management plan. That does make it challenging to approve or make a recommendation today.
And something I would also point out while Kennedy is pulling this up is part of the purpose for putting all of this online is that very often in previous plans we would find errors after they were published, and we wouldn't be able to go back and correct those errors. With these being housed kind of separately from the plan and kind of incorporated by reference, we are able to then, as we find errors like the missing data that Mr. Munderloh pointed out, we can go back in and correct those things, and then also add new years worth of data over time. So that was something that was really important to us, since the 5th management plans are this indefinite timeline, was having that ability to update and correct these over time.
Yeah, this has been a huge leap, and I think it's so important because we can see so much more when we can look through time on these things. So I see that you have it up, but the data behind it isn't available, it looks like, online. As I said, I remember I could open up graphs, or excuse me, basically Excel files and track these different things. So that it looks like that's not something we can just quickly look at today and make sure we're all talking about the same thing. So it sounds like that remains a conversation between ADWR and Member Munderloh. Correct.
Yes, Leslie, I think you are correct. You were right. We originally had the data in a link just below the dashboard. But I think it may have been missed as we transitioned this over to kind of our archive and have the original dashboard. It wasn't our intention to remove that Excel sheet, so it's something that we can definitely put back up.
Okay, no worries. I just thought for the sake of conversation today, if we could all see, where the question lies, then we can talk about it a little bit more. Okay, so moving a little bit more, I might, Vice Chair Holden, do I still have the floor, or do we need to rotate a little bit more with members?
No, go ahead and continue, Leslie.
Okay, so thank you. I wanted to check, I'm looking at the promulgation plan slide, and there's a hearing. So is there a date set for that at this point?
So we have not at this time published a hard timeline for each of the promulgation processes throughout this year. What we're going to be doing in order to manage our own staff workload is staggering those promulgations throughout the course of this year. And each one takes 4 to 6 months to complete. So obviously those processes will be overlapping. We're still finalizing the timeline, but very, very tentatively, we were looking at starting the promulgation for Prescott in the April timeframe.
Okay. Thank you. I think so much work has been done, you know, between pulling the data together, and that, you know, those assessments always had to be done, but you've moved them into an electronic format, so that's been a lot of work. I think the writing of the fifth management plan is a lot of work, and I have to be honest, I still have little sticky notes on the copy that I'm reviewing, because even though I feel like I should know this forward and backwards by now, over the years of being in water, it's still a lot going on, and trying to see how they work with our different sectors. If I look at it from, you know, how does this affect the city, and then how does it look across the AMA, because as a GUAC, we're trying to look more across the AMA. So I think my question then, because each question I have, I don't think there's time today to discuss it, but I'm thinking your recommendation is going to be, and I'm just trying to verify, is to speak to each one of the representatives you have from Muni and industrial and agriculture, although we don't really have that going on too much for the city, but overall it might be a question. If we have questions or concerns, should those go directly to those folks that presented today?
In terms of the data, absolutely, yes. If you have questions about the data, you can absolutely reach out directly to the folks that presented today. If you have a question more specifically about the conservation requirements or the plan itself, then you can reach out directly to me.
Okay, I should probably give an example. So let me give an example and see if we're on the same page. Here is that I'm looking at the GPCD program, because the city is designated. I know and understand that we do have the opportunity to move from the GPCD program, I believe, over to the non per capita. But on the GPCD program, if we stay in that, I'm reading that it translates into an acre-foot volume that will be tracked. And I started losing continuity there. So we're accustomed to seeing a target and an actual return for the city. And then if it moves into an acre-foot number, I'm not quite sure what that gets compared to. So that's an example of a question that I have that doesn't need to be answered today on this call, but is that, you know, something that goes to
yeah, that would be a question. Oh, sorry, Leslie. That would be a question for me because it has to do with the program itself rather than just the data. And very, very simply, just to answer that quickly, you'll still get a GPCD target or requirement and the actual achieved GPCD. The reason we convert into acre feet is to manage the flex accounts. The flexibility is managed in acre feet because population changes over time. So we track the flexibility portion of that program in acre feet rather than in GPCD units in order to account for those changes in population over time.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. As I said, I lost the thread somewhere, and I thought, wait, I might need to ask this question. And the last one that I have, because, you know, if I showed you the number of sticky notes I have, you would be like, no, please don't show us that. It's too many sticky notes. But, you know, we want to make sure we understand this clearly and that we can help manage into the future appropriately. I wanted to ask you about, in Chapter 8.4, it has 8.4.1, which is water scarcity and supply constraints. And it speaks to the water stacking principle, and it refers to Chapter 7. And I went to Chapter 7, and I think it might be a typo, so I don't think it's there, but I wanted to just, somehow, once again, I feel like I'm a little bit out of the loop here. So in former city water policies, we talked about integrating our supplies, so figuring out how to use them to their best abilities based on how infrastructure was laid out, the type of supply, the requirements in statute for these different water supplies. So we called it integrated. And so now it says, you know, we talk about conjunctive use, and it's one water. So it seems like one water is the new kind of word that people like to use. Same thing as integrated. So obviously I'm getting old. We have to keep using newer terms. But then it starts about water stacking. So I was wondering, I don't know if anybody's able to point me to the right chapter or explain this water stacking idea. Is that just similar to integrating in one water?
It's a little bit different, Leslie, and I'll make sure to email you. I've got a nice graphic, and we can share that with the rest of the group. It's a little bit different than the one water type concepts in that this is more of a regulatory function rather than a strategy type function. So the way stacking works in terms of our regulatory functions is that stacking is how we account for water use for compliance purposes. So if a farm, for example, is using farm is a bad example, sorry. How about if a golf course is using effluent and surface water and groundwater? The groundwater is the last thing that gets counted. So your groundwater kind of gets stacked on top of your other water uses. So that when we look at compliance, the amount that's going to be out of compliance is the amount of groundwater by which they're out of compliance. So if their allotment is 100 acre-feet and they used 110 acre-feet of other types of water and 20 acre-feet of groundwater, then they're really only out of compliance by 20, but they're still out of compliance despite not using the full volume in groundwater. So I know that's a little bit confusing, but it's really more of a compliance accounting thing than a management strategy thing.
Okay, thank you. That makes perfect sense now that it's stated. I'll follow up with you, and as I said, I haven't located the discussion in the fifth management plan when I looked in chapter 7, so I'll check again and see that reference is correct. Yeah, and we'll figure that one out. So I appreciate that. I think that's we're discussing that now here quite a bit at the city, is that we all need to be defining things and understanding the way things are laid out so there's not confusion or unnecessary back and forth challenges with people when we're not talking about the same thing or understanding it the same way it was intended for. So the stacking actually is very interesting because if it's more of a regulatory feature, it's how we're looking at what we call our water resource management model. And we were basically stacking and deciding what water supplies would be used first. And if we have linkage, appropriate linkage between that tool that the city's working on and into the regulatory environment, it just helps down the road. So, okay, that's, and I was hoping it wouldn't be too much. I'll mute myself for a while.
Leslie, if I could jump back in really quickly, I just got past a note here that reference in chapter 7 is section 7.7.2. So hopefully, yeah, it seems like the reference is okay, but we can also double check our chapter 8 reference to make sure we can be a little more specific about that.
Thank you, Leslie. I appreciate that. I have a question for Natalie.
Sure.
Is it the department's expectation that a positive recommendation regarding the draft plan come from the Groundwater Users Advisory Council today?
Ultimately, we are here for comments today, yes. So the statutory requirements specifically for management plans from the GUACs is that the GUACs comment on the draft plans before they are promulgated. So we would be more than happy to discuss additional comments or more detailed comments with you guys individually after this meeting, if that would be your preference. But ultimately, today is kind of the formal the formal comment request to meet that statutory requirement.
I guess I'm not sure that from what I've heard, that the GUAC is prepared to offer a positive recommendation today based on the comments that I heard. If that's the case, is there an opportunity for questions to be offered, recognized, and answered before a request for a recommendation is solicited from the GUAC? Natalie?
Sorry, I was just checking with Kyle on the timeline for the next GUAC meeting.
Okay.
Ultimately, we're going to need to, in order to meet that timeline of promulgating all of the plans by the end of the year. I mentioned early the Auditor General report that directed the department to move forward with those adoptions. We really do need to meet that timeline. So in order to meet that timeline, we are not able to delay beginning those promulgations. Our intent certainly is to, so I should back up. The draft that we published on January 31st was intended as an initial draft. We will be updating that draft in response to comments ahead of beginning the promulgation process for each AMA. So we'll publish kind of a final draft, an updated draft ahead of that, we'll publish an updated draft when we announce the hearing for each AMA. So there is an intention for additional updates to be incorporated into each of these drafts ahead of the promulgation. And then additionally, there's obviously that formal comment period as a part of the promulgation process.
Thank you. I appreciate that, but I'm not sure that answered the question that I had.
Fair. I guess the kind of blunt answer there is that our timeline is really tight, and we understand that we asked for you all to review the plan in a really short amount of time, and unfortunately, that's just kind of the nature of the amount of time that we have. So to the extent that you're able to offer any questions or comments today, we certainly can respond to those after this meeting.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask another question of ABWR?
Yes, John, please. Thank you.
So I'm trying to catch up here with the kind of the cycle of comments and edits that may occur. Is there any kind of set schedule then on when comments are due? You gave us today, at the end of the day, to provide comments on this version of the draft plan. And I would like more time because there's a lot to comment on. Nonetheless, I have some general comments, some of which I shared with you that we can send you, but I would like more time. When would we have the next due date, I guess, on when comments are due?
That date of today really was a soft deadline. With the hope that we would be getting in a fair number of comments that we could begin updating those drafts, as I mentioned. We certainly can accept additional comments after today. The kind of rub there is that at some point we're going to run out of time between when we're publishing those updated drafts and how much time we have to actually incorporate those comments. So particularly comments on things like the conservation programs where additional discussion would be required and additional back and forth may be necessary. We would really like those sooner than later, where we're going to have to do some follow-up. When it comes to the data, we certainly appreciate those comments. We certainly would love to have those comments, but perhaps there's a little bit of additional time on those comments because we are able to update and make corrections to that data over time. Does that help?
Well, only kind of partially in jest, but only partially. Could you extend the time frame on when annual reports are due? Because there's like one person here in Prescott Valley that can, that works on this, and it's a press for us too.
I understood, and we do have a process where we can waive the late fees associated with annual reports by request for certain situations. For situations like this, we would consider waiving those late fees if the annual report was late.
Again, I'm not clear, but you will take comments up to an uncertain point in time.
We can certainly take comments after today, but I would really encourage you to get them in as soon as possible.
Well, Vice Chair Holt has a question.
Yes.
So I think we're a little stuck because of a recommendation is being sought today. But if we have a member who says there's missing data that is supporting the text in this report, and I wish I could flip to it. I should have a sticky note on this. But, we do have a piece in this that refers to the dashboard and overdraft. Is it possible for where the concern is at to be, emailed over to Natalie Mast? There can be some discussion about what that looks like, and then is it possible to formulate a I guess not smaller, maybe smaller from AEWR's side, but formulate a time for a second GUAC in, a week and a half or two. I'm not sure how that impacts timelines, but, then the council itself can see how that was resolved and see if there, if a very basic recommendation can be made in a week and a half or so, and see then also continue to file comments on this.
If I could make a suggestion. Sorry, Leslie, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay.
If I could make a suggestion, particularly when it comes to the data, I have every confidence that we will be able to resolve those to your satisfaction. Perhaps an option for the recommendation today could be to just note the kind of need to resolve those data questions within the recommendation itself. Kind of making a recommendation with caveats or with reservations, if you will.
May I respond to that? Natalie?
Go ahead.
I'm not sure that I'm very comfortable with that, nor do I necessarily think it's very fair. I guess my previous question was, and I'm not sure it got answered, and I'll try to make it more clear, more blunt. Is today the drop dead date for a recommendation from the GUAC? And if it is, I'm not sure you're going to get a recommendation that the department's going to really be happy with. If that's the case, is there a manner or a way, such as Leslie suggested, that time be allowed to address the concerns and the questions that the GUAC has before the recommendation is solicited from the GUAC? If it has to be today, I think that's problematic. And I think that's what Leslie and John were trying to suggest as well. certainly don't want to speak for them, but that's what I'm hearing. Is there a way that we can move forward so that we can get these questions resolved and answered sufficiently for the concerns of the members so that a positive recommendation can be given to the director regarding the management plan?
Sure, I appreciate that, and I apologize if I didn't quite get to the heart of your question earlier. So a couple things here. One is that the requirement on the part of the GUAC regarding the management plans is to comment on the management plan before it's promulgated. So we certainly have had some discussion today. There have been some comments today. We look forward to seeing additional comments from you all. In the past, we have often done a formal recommendation. That is something we can do. That is something that is not necessarily required. The other piece that I would really like to emphasize is that I think most of the questions that I heard today are a little bit more related to the data contained as supplemental information in the plan, where the really critical pieces of the plan are really that regulatory language, the conservation programs that I mentioned. The data in the plan is really supplemental. It's kind of in support of those conservation programs. And the conservation programs themselves, to my understanding, with fairly not small changes in the data, but with these corrections to the data, the overall historical trends to the data are pretty strong. And I don't anticipate that there would be additional changes to the conservation programs as a result of these data corrections. So I think what I would hope for is any comments or recommendations that you may have specifically on those conservation programs, which really are the kind of the critical legally enforceable portions of this plan.
Well, let me go back to the members of the council. Are members prepared to offer a recommendation to the department today?
Mr. Vice Chair, what I'm hearing is that the fifth management plan is a conservation plan. And if that is the case, then those sections that relate to anything but conservation could be removed, and we could then move forward on the conservation plan for the Prescott AMA.
If I could address that, Member Munderloh, the kind of critical pieces of the management plan is the conservation program. I had a statute up on the screen earlier that talks about the management plans shall contain conservation programs designed to reduce withdrawals of groundwater. There is additional information that is also required by statute to be included in the management plans, including specific types of programs, including some information about natural recharge, those types of things. So while the kind of important pieces of the plan is the conservation requirements, the management plans at their core really are conservation plans. This supplemental information has been historically included not only to fulfill those statutory requirements, but also in support of the conservation requirements themselves to provide some additional context there.
And Leslie, Is the city prepared to make a recommendation on the fifth management plan today?
Guess that's your answer.
Yeah.
Slow. I don't think we're going to lose. I know that they're working under really tight timelines at the department. I think if we could have that opportunity for Member Munderloh and Natalie to have just a quick back and forth on that, is it possible for the GUAC to make a recommendation through an email that we're all on to keep timelines as short as possible once we make sure all members are taken care of? To formalizing another meeting and trying to get everybody together, is that acceptable from the department's standpoint? That we can vote through email and recommend.
Thank you, Leslie. Natalie and Kyle, is there a way we can do that?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, I think that sounds good to both of us. We just need a motion and a second, and then we can proceed with that.
I would entertain a motion.
I apologize, but you faded out a little bit, Leslie, on that. I'm really sorry. I didn't quite get all of it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, my audio is not the best today. This is what happens when we switch platforms. The computers forget how they're supposed to link themselves. But what I was proposing was that I don't think it's going to take, it sounds like, much time for you to be able to show where the concern is, for Natalie to be able to respond to the concern. And then I was proposing that we work through an email where we have the GUAC membership. If we make a motion to recommend, then we can get all the I's in order, and we have it documented through email versus pulling another meeting together. And I think that could save time. We probably by the end of the week, if everybody's active and watching their emails.
I appreciate the idea, Leslie. I'm concerned that it's doesn't follow open meeting rules.
Okay. Is that how the AMA director also feels? Not feels. Do we need to pull another meeting together, such as this?
Perhaps a motion could be worded that would allow the department to use whatever process they choose that would be consistent with open meeting law and consistent with the expediency that we're requesting, and not concern ourselves with what those details are with respect to the motion for a recommendation from the GUAC. Would that work? Does that make sense?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, that makes sense to me.
So would one of the members like to suggest a motion?
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes.
This is Bob Recker here. Have we, with this plan, are we saying that we have completely, how do I want to word this? Do we want to include or not include the goal that has been set since 1980 and we recognize we needed to import water in 1999, that we have completely abandoned the requirement or the goal to achieve safe yield in our AMA, which I thought was the whole purpose for the program to begin with, so that we could recognize it and take steps to assure the citizens of this AMA that we would be in safe yield by 2025. Has that goal been abandoned?
Natalie, could you help us with that?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Vice Chair. So the goal in statute is framed as that the AMA shall attempt to achieve safe yield by 2025.
Okay.
What is important to note there is that attempt word. Ultimately, there are limitations to the statutory authorities. And ultimately, there are practical limitations, right? It was never intended that safe yield be achieved at any cost. So that's kind of what is in consideration here. It's certainly not an abandonment of the safe yield goal, and we talk a lot about how the goal, despite not achieving the goal at this point in the Prescott AMA, it has served the AMA well and has left the AMAs and the state in a better position because of its existence. So there's a little bit of nuance there where we don't anticipate that the goal will be achieved in the Prescott AMA by 2025, but that doesn't mean that we don't continue working toward that goal. So the design of this plan is really to continue working toward that goal over time beyond 2025, as long as these requirements are in effect.
Does that help, Bob?
No. It's just frustrating because we've told the citizens in the AMA that the goal, not a wish, but the goal was to achieve safe yield. And we've changed that date systematically over a period of years, and now the goal was 2025. And now I'm hearing that, it's a suggestion, it's not a goal. And I know that the cost to import water is very, very high. And yet I see this organization, there's no action steps at all. There's been no effort to look to the powers to be in the state to help us achieve the goal. And I don't know if the other AMAs in the state have just set safe yield aside or not, but I was hopeful that the Prescott AMA would goal for it and actually achieve safe yield, as our citizens have been told since 1980.
Vice Chair Holt.
I'm off my soapbox. Thank you.
Were we going to try to make a motion about meeting for another GUAC meeting?
Ignore that.
My understanding is that we wanted to draft a motion regarding the recommendation to the director regarding the GUAC's support of the fifth management plan. I don't know exactly how to word that motion though, and I solicited some assistance from the other members. Are there any ideas about how we can do that?
We seem to be struggling here. I think the motion is that we have another opportunity to convene, however is determined to be appropriate and legal by ADWR, to then pass the motion with the recommendation to the director to promulgate this fifth management plan. But again, I think that's another opportunity to have more discussion with the ADWR staff and clear up some of these issues over the next week. So if we can do that, it's tough for me, but in a week, and provide that motion, however we can do that, inside of or outside of a public meeting. I guess that's what we're after. So not very well worded, but a motion to review this over the next week, reconvene for this purpose, to recommend to the director the promulgation of the fifth management plan.
So moved.
So now we have an opportunity to discuss the motion. Kyle, Natalie, does that motion get us where we need to be?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, I believe that's where we want to be, and for both Matt and myself.
Okay. Any additional discussion?
So with this meeting being next Monday, then?
You'll need to tell us.
Today?
You'll need to tell us.
Okay.
I mean, I think we were attempting to craft the motion in such a manner that the department needs to get back to us to tell us when that meeting will be
Understood.
and in what format it ought to be convened. If there's no additional comments, shall we, all those in favor indicate by yay?
Yay.
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 All those opposed? Hearing no opposition, I guess the motion carries. So we'll wait to hear back from the department on when and how to conduct this subsequent meeting of the GUAC for the purpose of obtaining a recommendation to the director regarding the promulgation of the fifth management plan. Item number 8 on the agenda is a call to council. Do any of the council members have any topics they'd like to bring forward?
Vice Chairman.
Yes.
That was a difficult discussion that we just had, and I just want to extend to the department that I think what our challenges are up here. I know that it was mentioned, limited staffing and annual report season. A lot's going on, but we also have. I think what I'm trying to say is that we're, as a GUAC, there's no intent to be difficult or delay anything. I think we're really at a crossroads, and probably we're not the only AMA. We're watching what's happening in other AMAs. We see so much coming at us, and I know that, okay, what does that mean? Sustainability of supplies into the long term, how drought continues to affect us, how growth continues meeting the needs of new people in the area, working with our aquifer system. We know we're small. We just have, I think, so many different things going on, and I know that also translates back to the department. And how do you craft something to run the whole gamut here, knowing that each AMA is unique. So I just want to say thank you for offering us the opportunity to just have a little bit more time to think about this, make sure we're in step. And a secondary is it seems our GUAC here in Prescott AMA also will need the membership renewed and so or updated. additions to, so we have a full range of brains here to try to work through some of these things. Generally, the job seems fairly straightforward, but when we get into these management plans, that's setting a course well into the future for this area. So we need to also have that. Maybe that'll be a topic soon, as if we'll be able to get some more folks back on, fill some of the empty chairs in this AMA. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Leslie. Any other comments from members? Agenda item number 9 is call to public. It appears we have no comments from public. So unless there's an...
Excuse me, but there are some questions in the chat.
I'm sorry?
There are some questions in the chat, but the main question was, I know that CWAG was intending to submit comments, and we didn't know whether today was the firm deadline for comments from the public.
I can respond to that. Similar to what I told the members, it is a soft deadline, but we would really encourage you to submit those as soon as possible in order that we can properly consider them for incorporation into the plan.
We should be able to get them in this week. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Well, unless there's an objection, I will be adjourning this meeting. Hearing no objections, the meeting is adjourned at 12:21 p.m. Thank you all very much.
You take care.
Thank you. Have a good day.